Hello, everybody. This is Gregory from 5 Minute Catholic Apologetics. This is our first live stream, and I'm very excited about this. I don't anticipate a lot of people showing up, which is totally fine because this episode will be cataloged for years to come. I've mentioned it in my episode, I think Gregory 101, how I anticipate to do this until I am dead. So who knows, in 10 years, 15 years, maybe a lot of people will have watched this inaugural live stream. There are a couple announcements I want to make. I do have a live stream with the religious hippie, Amber Rose. You might know her content. I put a link for her channel on you can see there's a picture of her upcoming, and it's going to be on Memorial Day Saturday. So this Saturday at 3 o'clock. And I'm bringing her on to discuss apologetics and really to talk about like what's going on with the Gen Zer Catholics. Because if you don't know, Amber Rose is in her lower 20s, and her content is excellent, and she's really evangelizing to that generation. So please come on to that uh, to that live stream, which is going to be Saturday. Today we're going to talk to Joseph. Joseph is a traditional Catholic man who wants to remain anonymous, and I respect that for any of my interviewees. So we're going to bring him on in a second, and we're just going to talk about whatever we feel like talking about. I mean, mostly it's going to be just about his history. Why is he a traditional Catholic? I released that episode on Monday. What is traditional Catholicism and what draws him to that? Was he always that, or was he like me, growing up a Novus Ordo kid? And talk about that. We'll probably touch base and talk a little about, as traditional Catholics, what's our take on the traditional Catholic outlets, and talk about the different kind of branches of TradCath. So we'll talk a little about SSPX and Sedevacanism, if that's what he wants to talk about. We'll also talk about a little about Catholic dating, the milieu of Catholic dating right now, because he is a single Catholic man. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about church politics. And most importantly, for anybody who is listening, uh, you can call in. There's a phone number below. So if you are a Protestant and have a question about the Catholic faith, if you want to do a dig on the Catholic faith, you're more than welcome to call, because we are more than ample to defend Holy Mother Church. If you are a Catholic who want to call in and just ask a question about me or Joseph, or just comment on something, or you want our opinion on something, call in. The other thing you can do is you can super chat. If you appreciate what we're talking about, you can do a super chat. I think it should be set up. If not, you'll be able to see if you can. And just understand, like, if you make a $5 donation, YouTube does get half of that, and I get the other half. But if you're more than welcome to do that as well. So those are some things I wanted to talk at the beginning. I'm going to bring Joseph on here. We'll do a quick prayer before we start. Joseph, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Let's start with just a basic prayer here. Lord Jesus Christ, thank you for all the blessings you bestowed upon us. Please help this interview go well, and please help all Christians uh, turn away from sin and be the best Christians that they can be. We ask this in your name. Amen. Joseph. All right. Thank you for coming on. In full disclosure, I do know Joseph. I wouldn't say I know him well, but we've gone to the same parish, and we've had some conversations. And I thought it'd be good to bring him on, and we're just going to just talk about him, and he's more than welcome to ask me questions, and we're just going to shoot the sheetrock, so to speak. So Joseph, tell us about yourself. Like, how old are you, first of all?
All right. Well, first of all, Greg, I just want to thank you for like inviting me on to your first ever live stream. Like, sure, you probably could have chose just about anybody to do this first live stream with. So, I'm incredibly flattered that you chose me.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you coming on. So it's mutual. So tell us about you.
I grew up in the Catholic Church my entire life, and I'm in my mid 20s. Grew up in the Catholic Church my whole life. My One of my parents is a Catholic, the other one's a Protestant, and I grew up at a Novus Ordo parish my entire life, and like in some like a degree or form, thanks to my Catholic parent, the faith has always been a pretty central part of my life. I wasn't always very enthusiastic about it, but even at points like my lowest enthusiasm, um, it's always like played a like some form in my life. Like for example, it's like even at my least enthusiastic points, I would still say prayers every night before I go to bed or before meals, and I still attend church every Sunday.
Well, let's back it up a little. So you said your parents were not the same faith. How did they meet? Did they get permission from the bishop, a dispensation to marry? Did they marry civilly? Give us a little background on that.
Well, as I don't really know like the full story behind that. Like I know that they met through some mutual friends of theirs that they were actually both dating different people at the time they first met, and they that is like they broke up with those people shortly afterwards, and then like when they started dating. So like that was like that's sort of what I know about how they met, and then because I only assume that they got a dispensation from the bishop when they decided to get married. Because like I do know they got married in the church,
Okay.
so I guess they would have had to. And then there's like my Protestant parent, like whenever my Catholic parent, and like I'm trying to try to leave like gender labels or like like I know that sounds funny, but I'm trying to keep like the gender labels out of this because say I'm doing this anonymously, so like anybody who hears this who like thinks this sound familiar, like I don't want them to catch on that it's me, and like
Well, I don't.
we can talk more about that later.
I don't think you have to worry about that. I mean, we could have got you a little voice modulator, but the funny thing is your voice sounds right now like you're in a voice modulator. You have a voice that's meant for radio. You got
Oh,
that
okay.
great voice. You have a really good voice.
All right.
So, do you have any siblings?
One, a younger brother.
Is he a practicing Catholic?
Uh, no, he isn't. Like, as far as I know, the last time he attended mass was actually this, past Christmas.
So he's a 2 times a year Catholic.
Not exactly. It's like I'm not. I don't even think he really even identifies as like as a Catholic anymore. It's like I've even actually tried like asking him like what he even believes anymore, and he wouldn't even tell me.
Hmm. Hmm.
It was like if
And,
I actually had to guess, he's either an agnostic or he might actually even be an atheist.
and why do you think that is? Like, why did you go down the road of the opposite way and he went down the road of losing his faith? Like, what was the difference between the two of you and your
Well,
upbringing?
it's like something like you got to know is that my younger brother and I like we've been like polar opposites like ever since we were little kids. Okay, it's like where yeah, it's like I even think like I might have talked to you a bit about this like the few times that we've talked before. It's like whereas like I was always like the good kid, the really obedient kid, or at least like most of the time. But my brother was always more of a he was always a lot more rebellious than I was. It's like
Mhm.
sort of like a good example of that when we were in a elementary school. I only ever got sent to the school principal one time, just once. But like look and but remember like back when he was in elementary school, he was in and out of the principal's office all the time.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's just sort of like one example of just how different we actually are.
What about your mother? Does she attend mass
Yeah,
regularly?
she's the Catholic parent. My father's a Protestant.
Yes, but does she attend mass still? And does he go with her, or does he not go to anything?
Most of the time, he actually does go with her, and like in fact, I actually think that or like one of the parishioners at our old church, you like joke that some like there have been occasions where he's actually gone to church more than she has.
And how would you describe her faith? Is she a traditional Catholic too, or is she more of a moderate, a liberal? How would you describe her?
She's I wouldn't categorize her as a traditional Catholic, or I wouldn't categorize her as a liberal either. I guess like a more appropriate term would be a like a conservative Novus Ordo type Catholic. Is like she goes like to conventional like suburbia type church with like very like modernist architecture and but during like a like the midterms or like the presidential elections, like as far as I know, she's always voted Republican.
Okay. And I'm assuming she's okay with the five Catholic non-negotiables. She's against abortion and euthanasia and stuff like that. Gay marriage. Is she against gay marriage, homosexual marriage?
I haven't asked her about that in a long time.
What's your sense?
Yeah, it's like that's right. Like the five non-negotiables: abortion, euthanasia, gay marriage. Is like embryonic stem cell research and the
The, well, we'll get to it. So it's gay, it's homosexual marriage, it's embryonic stem cell research, it's cloning. Cloning's the fifth
yeah
one.
cloning. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, either way, okay. So
Yeah,
you
as far as I know, she's on board with all of that. But like, I've never asked her about the gay marriage thing in a while. It's like, that that might have you like altered a little bit, but I'm not really sure.
okay? So what led you to go from just the typical Novus Ordo upbringing to where you're at now? Now, in full disclosure, both of us, and I've mentioned this on my videos, I attend a church that's part of the ordinary of the Church St. Peter, which is essentially a national diocese. Joseph, you might know there's maybe like 30 churches in North America. Most of it in the United States, and they're former Anglican congregations that have come back to Holy Mother Church. I think it was JP the second that gave that ability, and it's I like to say it's got the trappings of the TLM, but the mass is in English. So what I mean by trappings is it's ad orientem, the altar's against the wall, the priest is facing the altar, just like before Vatican II. Everybody has received the Eucharist kneeling. There's altar rails. There's no there's no female altar servers. The architecture I would consider to be classic as well. They do tincture, so they'll dip the blood of Christ they'll dip the body of Christ into the blood of Christ, and you receive both species that way. So what made you go from where you were to where you're at now?
I guess like maybe a good place to start is maybe just start a few years before that even happened. As it was about like the fall of 2015. I just started off at college. Like my parents helped me move into my dorm, and before they drove back to our hometown, they attended mass with me, and during the announcements towards the end of the mass, they found out that they were like holding a retreat for college students, and my mom really like encouraged me to go. Like she really wanted me to go, but at that time I didn't want to have anything to do with that, like at all. But like she insisted, and like ultimately I relented, and I signed up for the retreat, and I went, and but like that's not where I started to like revert more towards the TLM. Like that's that retreat was actually very like it was not a good retreat at all.
Mhm.
And it's like that one of the things that I disliked about it so much is that one of the instructors on that retreat had just a tremendous amount of phony enthusiasm. Okay, and like her level of phony enthusiasm, it just drained me even more than I already was. Like I already didn't want to be there. So it was like she was making me not want to be there even more. So and like the reason why I bring this up is that it's like the reason I bring it up is that that whole like bad experience that I had, it kind of pushed me away from like getting like any like more involved in like a campus faith life.
Yeah.
And so like my focus, like for most of the time when I was in college was like purely political. And I got involved with some like the conservative like libertarian groups on campus, and like that was my focus for a while. And like it wasn't really until towards the end of college where I started to develop more of a interest in my faith. And that because like that was around the time, and like I might have learned this earlier, but it may have just like slipped my mind because like it's like I said, I haven't always been very enthusiastic about my faith, but it was towards the end of college where I learned that if you were in a state of mortal sin, you couldn't receive Holy Communion.
Wow. Okay, so let's back that up. So I mean, you went to religious education wherever you grew up. Was it not that good? Because I mean, if you're learning that in college, this goes back to one of the things that we complain about as one of the fruits of Vatican Council II is poor the woeful catechesis. Not in all parishes, let's be fair, and it's not my way of saying that Vatican II was not a valid council, but I don't think anybody can deny that the catechesis has been atrocious for the last 60 years. So tell us about your religious upbringing. You were confirmed, I'm assuming, as a teenager. How did you go your whole life not knowing that?
Well, it's one of two possibilities, and as I say, like my memory is a little fuzzy, so it's either I wasn't paying attention, which is a possibility, or number two, they really just forgot to tell me that for some reason.
My mom
And
has
it's
this
like
way.
it's funny that you bring that up though, because you like once I actually did just start to like the investigate traditionalism some more, it really made me realize a lot of things. Like for instance, like I went to Catholic school for most of my life, and you just see like once I started to learn more about the traditional faith, it made me think a lot of the stuff that I went through at Catholic school, and I just sort of came to realize that most Catholic schools are really just college prep schools with the word Catholic thrown in, and a lot of the theology classes they teach are really just like world religions classes.
I will comment on that. So I went to Catholic schooling all through my life until college, until I graduated from a Catholic college. Elementary, I went to a Jesuit high school, and so forth. And I will say that, I mean, this was in the 80s and 90s, and the Jesuits, as there's probably more atheists that are more Catholic than the Jesuits right now.
Yeah.
Not to admonish the Jesuits, but it's certainly not the 16th century Jesuits. But yeah, I mean, look, we would go to mass at least once a week, and I did take a world religions class. I would agree with that. I would say like my remembrance of Catholic school catechesis was learning how to do the rosary, memorizing your prayers, feast days, liturgical calendar. That's about it. I mean, it was not deep stuff, and certainly there was no apologetics taught at all. I'm
Yeah,
glad.
that sounds a lot
glad.
like a lot of my like religious education as well, like a lot of my catechesis training.
Okay, so let's go back. So the town you grew up with, did it have a Latin mass, and you just didn't know about it, or you didn't even register in your psyche growing up until you moved to the town we live in now?
Yeah, it never really even remotely like registered in my psyche until like relatively recently. It's like I had heard of traditionalism beforehand, but like I always just assumed that like the people who attended like the TLM were just the remnants of a bygone era.
Hmm. Okay,
And that
so
like
tell.
most of them were just like old timers who had like grown up with the TLM prior to Vatican II, and like they were just like clinging on to an era that had just like come and gone, and that they were just incapable of letting go of the past. And like it wasn't until actually like a few years ago where I started to realize like maybe there's an element to this that I never really even saw before.
Okay, so what made you go to a Latin mass or the ordinariate church? And what made you
Nice.
go there? And what did it appeal to you? Why did you start going there?
I actually say I started going there is like as I said, like towards the end of college, like I had that like I learned that if you're in a state of mortal sin, you can't receive Holy Communion, right? So like I sort of like rewind back to that is like after that I started going to confession every week, and it was through that I wanted to learn more about my faith, the Catholic Church. Like maybe learn some things that I may have either learned before and forgot, or things that maybe like the sisters who ran my school neglected to teach me. So it's like after I finished college, like I got my first job, and I started listening to some audiobooks on Audible that dealt with Catholicism. Like the first one I listened to was one of Bishop Barron's books, which I barely even remember that one.
Mhm.
And it was like another book that I read was like The Myth of Hitler's Pope by Rabbi David Dallin,
Mhm.
and that had a tremendous like effect on me because like one of the things that Dallin sort of talked about in his book is like sort of the accusations that have been made against Pope Pius XII, that he was a Nazi collaborator, that he hated Jews, and that he was sort of like a puppet for Hitler. And one of the things he sort of talked about towards the end of his book is that a lot of the people who propagate those rumors, which are completely unsubstantiated, is that like a lot of those people who like spread lies like that, they usually have like they're a lot like Holocaust deniers because like they usually have some kind of like agenda, like ulterior agenda that they don't want to admit to.
Sure. I mean, that
And,
is
and it's
pretty,
like and like he even goes on to say like a lot of these like people who have written like books condemning Pius XII or or he even mentioned like this one playwright who wrote this like this screenplay that's critical of Pius XII. Turns out that he was actually a close friend and confidant of David Irving, who is like one of like the biggest like Holocaust deniers out there today.
yeah, I
And
think
like
it's,
he basically goes on to explain that that a lot of like this anti Pius XII rhetoric, sort of ties into sort of this plot to delegitimize the like pre-Vatican II church, and it's part of like this bigger plot to sort of like liberalize and weaken the Catholic Church. And he calls upon Catholics to stubbornly cling to their traditions. And like that struck a chord with me because if a total outsider, like a rabbi, can understand the importance and significance of Catholic traditions, then why couldn't I and like countless other Catholics understand their significance either? And like that's really what catapulted me into wanting to learn more about the traditional faith.
yeah. So going with Pius XII, so wasn't the chief rabbi of Rome? Didn't he convert
Yes,
after the
that's
war, which was
Ingeno
revolved
Zoli.
by
Like
it?
that was actually like one of the things that Rabbi Dallin talked about very heavily in his book. Like he never mentions the fact that he converted to Catholicism at the end of the war. Like he wouldn't want you to know that.
Mm.
But but one of the things that he does mention is how highly Rabbi Zoli thought of Pius XII, how they were like very good friends, and how at the end of the war, he and countless other Jews actually spoke in defense of Pius XII and said that had it not been for the efforts of the Vatican and like countless other like members of the clergy, they wouldn't even be around today. I believe it was even Albert Einstein that said that no organization in the world did more to help the Jews of Europe than the Catholic Church.
Yeah, that's not going to get front page headlines at all. Yeah. So with Pius XII, Cromwell's book was it Cromwell, right? He was the one because I remember my father had that book, and that book, Hitler's Pope, right? And
Yeah,
there's a
that was
picture of
Cromwell who wrote
yeah,
that.
yeah. There's that picture when he's leaving because Pacelli, Pius XII was the nuncio for Germany in
Right.
the 30s, right? So I mean that was just horrible slander and revisionist history. But a lot of Catholics remember that, and they actually think that he was a collaborator with Hitler. And so, regardless of like what this Jewish rabbi was saying and others, that's still kind of the narrative that you do hear with a lot of people. I'm going with Hitler, right? Goebbels say, "You tell a lie enough, it's the truth." And
Hmm.
well, either way, so what appeals to you about the because you go to the ordinary, but you also go to a traditional Latin mass in a Novus Ordo parish, so it's a Novus Ordo parish, but they do a Latin mass. So what draws you to either of these masses?
I guess like with like most traditions, like I think one of the things that I guess like psychologically draws me to it is that it's sort of a way of I don't know, it's sort of a good way of like planting my roots in the past, or like a way of holding on to like those past traditions that used to make the Catholic Church so great. Like a lot of those traditions that we don't really hold on to anymore.
And so when you went to a Latin mass and you saw the priest back facing you, I mean, were you like, "Whoa, this is offensive? His back's against me," or did you kind of already prep yourself and you knew what the Latin mass was like? And my take of the Latin mass, and I know people who haven't gone to them that often, but it's the lack of participation. And that's one of the things I really love about it, because in the Novus Ordo Mass, it's always he speaks, the priest speaks, you speak, you respond, there's songs. And the TLM, it's just he's doing most of the prayers. You don't even, the Eucharistic prayers are quiet. You don't even hear them. He's facing the tabernacle. There's a little music, but of course it's very, it's simple music and it's going to be organ music. And I just find it to be just much more relaxing where I don't have to be focused and paying attention all the time to the responses, where I can just kind of just focus on the beauty and timelessness of the TLM. Have you ever noticed that? Like going from a Novus Ordo to a TLM, how quiet the TLM is?
Yes, I've noticed that too. And I guess like something I could sort of add on to that is it's like one of the other things I liked about the TLM is like just how much different it was from like Novus Ordo services, and like even how like similar like Novus Ordo services are to Protestant services, and like the just sort of like to build on that. Like when I was a little kid, like there was a few times where I would attend like Lutheran services with my grandparents, and if you were to ask me back then, like to tell you the difference between like this Lutheran service and the like the Catholic services I usually attend, if you're to tell me to say like tell the difference between these two pictures, it's kind of like that meme that you see online from the Office where it says say like what the difference is between these two pictures, and like the response is it's the same picture.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I think that meme sort of applies with like Novus Ordo services and a lot of Protestant services, because like if you look at them side by side, for like a lot of them, it's pretty much the same thing.
No doubt. I mean, that was Annabelle Bonini's intention. I mentioned that
Exactly.
when I showed his quote at the end of that episode on Mondays. Bonini's intention was to make the Mass more palatable to Protestants, and there's a lot of connections to the Novus Ordo, to Kramer's Mass that he implemented in the mid 16th century. It was the same thing as well too. I mean, we could talk about Bonini and his alleged
Right.
Freemason
Yeah, exactly. Like we
revelations,
could
but
talk about that. So, like I got like sort of like two ideas when it comes to that, and like I've as I even like use like these ideas for like even like Pope John the 23rd. Like things like Bugnini, like assuming like the stuff that's been said about him isn't true, like he wasn't actually a Freemason. Either well, actually, let me rewind. Like he was either naive enough to think that these innovations would actually work, or he had like some ulterior motives, and he was actually incredibly malicious.
well, I mean, you've read Malachi Martin's book in the Vatican, which I think is a great historical fiction novel. And what's the name
Right.
of Bunini's character? And it's like
It's a
Vignani.
it's a Suganini.
Yeah.
Like very, very slight change. But even in like Malachi Martin's book, like his depiction of like John the 23rd is like sort of like my interpretation of that is that like John the 23rd was he was a very naive individual who thought that he could bring all peoples of the world together and usher in world peace. And unfortunately, there was some very malicious people working behind the scenes who just took advantage of his naivete to push their own agenda.
I don't,
And unfortunately, Bugnini was one of them.
this reminds me of I mean, you were too young to remember 9/11, but I remember after 9/11, you heard a lot of this. Well, it revealed the CIA and the FBI were so incompetent, and it was just always like scapegoats and excuses. And I'm not going to go down the 9/11 truther thing, but you hear this about JP2. I mean, JP2, there's different camps. Of course, we do have a set of a canist here. They'll tell you that JP2, of course, was not a legitimate pope. The conservatives would tell you different things about. Some of them adore him. Some would say that yes, he was a kind of a big pusher of the false ecumenism, to having the different religions come to Assisi and all that. Some would say, well, he inherited this broken curia from Paul VI, and he just did the best what he could with trying to purge the homosexual clergy and all the sex crisis issues. I don't know, man. I wasn't there. I don't know. He is a saint, so he is in heaven. Holy Mother Church has designated that he is a saint. And wasn't he canonized the same day as John the 23rd, or was that Paul VI that was canonized the same day? Do you know?
As John Paul II and John the 23rd were canonized on the same day.
I
I,
love how
I
prof-
remember that because like I still remember like seeing like advertisements for that around the time it was happening.
I just think that's so like very kind of Pope Francis, and he's like, let me placate the radical. Well, let me placate the left and let me placate the right at the same time. Let's
Yeah.
canonize both of these guys. But either way, okay. So let's stay on task. So you love the, I guess, the solemnity of the ordinary at mass and the TLM, and that's one of the reasons you go there. The timelessness, especially of the TLM, and that's one of the things I've mentioned. It's like this is the same mass that so many of the saints throughout our patrimony went to, and I love that how it bonds me to that. That's one of the reasons I do my rosary in Latin, because it bonds me to the history of our faith, and
Yeah.
I think
That's
it's
why I do
beautiful.
my rosary in Latin too.
Yeah, great. So, anything else about the TLM you want to talk about? Like, what else draws you to it? I mean, do you like seeing the women dressed modestly as opposed to going to Novus Ordo where they
Well,
could
it's
be
like
wearing
I like
shorts
I
and
like
skimpy dresses?
I like seeing like everybody like dress like more modestly at the TLM. It's like
Yeah,
yeah, it's like even after that, like I started wearing suits to like to mass. I don't do it so much anymore because because like I've lost a whole lot of weight. Like especially like recently. So it's like a lot of my suits don't even fit me anymore. They actually look kind
that's
of
great.
baggy on me, and like I haven't gotten around to like having them altered. But like once I do, I'm gonna start like wearing suits like to mass again.
Yeah, I think seeing other people dress up makes us dress up. But the other thing I like is like I love seeing these young families. I love seeing these women who are like 38. There's 5 kids and they're pregnant. And I think
Hmm.
that again, going back to the timelessness of the church, now we consider that strange, or even they're shamed for big families, but that was normal for hundreds of years of the Catholic faith, was to have big families. And so when you go to the ordinariate or a TLM, you'll see the big families, you see the modest dress, and you see the reverence. The people are paying attention, their focus. It's a serious thing, and it's just great. And you juxtapose that with not. Let's be fair. Not all Novus Ordo masses uh, lack solemnity. I'm sure you and I have both been to ones that are pretty good,
Hmm.
for sure. But as a whole, if you have to take a composite, this is why we have that 4-part series of liturgical abuses that drive me crazy. You take a composite of the TLM or ordinary and a composite of the Novus Ordo, you're going to see certainly a lot more what I would perceive to be distractions, liturgical abuses, liturgical licenses like liturgical dances and bad pop rock and other things like that. Do you ever foresee a time that you will stop going to either an ordinariate or a TLM?
No, I can't foresee that at all.
Okay. Yeah, I don't either. I mean, I do live pretty far away from my ordinariate church now, and we really don't have, like where I live, I don't have a Latin mass that's close by. We do have an SSPX chapel that's probably 20 minutes from me, and then there is that church that we talked about that is probably about 35 minutes from me. The reason I don't go to that church is because I find it to be dissonant. When you have a architecture that is very Novus Ordo, and then they're doing the Latin mass in it, it's hard for me to focus. So like I
Oh,
want to go to a Latin mass where the church looks like a traditional mass. And the city that we live in, which has 1.3 million people in it, it's kind of shocking how we really don't have a lot of options. We just have the ordinariate church, and then we have the church that has that Latin mass, uh, and then we have the SSPX, which we can talk about. Well, Sedevacanus wants us to talk about it now. So, uh, do you want to talk about the different like branches of the trad movement, the mad trads, the glad trads, the rad mad trads?
sure, we can talk about that.
Have you? What is your impression of other traditional Catholics?
The impression that I've had has been an overwhelmingly like positive one. Is like a lot of people at the Novus Ordo, like the big Novus Ordo apologists, will have you believe that like the traditionalists are like overly rigid, like they're overly judgmental, like et cetera, et cetera. But like I've never really like gotten that vibe from the traditionalists. Like they've been very welcoming, very like accepting. They've been very like, well, it's like you get the idea.
Well, okay, so but let's go back to what Pope Francis says. So Pope Francis put the I guess what would you say, the prohibitions or curtailing the TLM, because he said that that branch of Catholicism was divisive. And so when you're saying how a lot of the liberal media or the liberal Catholics will depict the trad caths as being angry, not so closeted sedevacanists, I mean, in some ways, Pope Francis is kind of saying that, because that was one of the arguments he mentioned in his it wasn't encyclical, it was
It was
whatever,
a no, I think it was an encyclical.
was it?
I think so.
But either way, he said it's because the TLM is divisive, and I don't know. To me, it's like the German schismatic cardinals. To me, seem a little more divisive, but that's
Yeah,
coming
like
from the tradition.
they're a lot more like divisive than the and the TLM has. Like those like German cardinals and like German bishops, like they've been doing things that like would make our ancestors just like keel over in their graves. And it's like if you want to see like and like if I could like speak to Pope Francis right now, is like okay, like you can talk about like divisiveness all day, but I think like there's like the even like bigger issue is destructiveness. Is like you like take a look at like everything that's happened ever since the end of Vatican II and the creation of the Mass of Paul VI. Is like prior to Vatican II, there were hordes of young men who were like ready to like to sign up and like attend seminary and become
Mhm.
priests, but that number has dropped significantly. And like that's like one of the things I hear like a lot of like the mainstream church talk about is the priest shortage. But the thing is, that's just the tip of the iceberg that the church is facing. It's like not only ordinations are down, but also marriages are down,
Mhm.
like church attendance is down. Like a lot of the like the consecrated, like brotherhoods and the like sisterhoods, like a lot of them are like those like that's gone down as well. And then on top of that, Catholic schools are shutting down left and right. And it's
Right.
like it
So
seems to
yeah,
me like all like post like Vatican II establishment has
yeah, it's a motu proprio. What he did was a motu proprio. Go ahead, continue, Joseph.
it's like the whole like a post Vatican II establishment has just been very destructive for the church. It's like the church has just been rendered to like this gutted, hollow version of its former self, and it just like honestly, it's kind of disgusting. Like, and
Well,
it seems like to me like that is a much bigger issue than the so-called divisiveness of like the traditional elements who are actually trying to do something about that.
yeah, I think the question I would ask him is, why would you want to persecute the church of our patrimony? You know, why would you want to persecute the mass that's been the mass of our forefathers for at least 1800 years? I mean, there's some estimates that Peter was doing masses in Latin even before he was martyred in the 50s and 60s AD or 66 AD. So that's my question. And going back to vocations, you know, they always misrepresent that, because if you look at the ordinariate, for example, their seminary is overflowing.
Hmm.
So when they say there's all these problems, and you're right, you know, the sacraments, baptisms are down, confirmations are down, sacramental marriages are down, all these things, these are what we call fruits of Vatican II. No modernist can deny the numbers. Now, I don't know how they're going to respond in a way that's going to spin that. But this idea that the whole church is floundering is not true. I mean, we see it booming and flourishing in the TLM and in the ordinary and in FSSP and, you know, these places like that, the TLM. So that, like, what I would say is, Novus Ordo pastors, why don't you have some humility and go to these churches and take what they're doing that's working and bring it to your church? So whether that be better homiletics, more solemnity, which I think is a big one, right? Get rid of the horrible 1960s folk music. Get rid of the banners, the
Hmm.
resurrected Jesus. You know, learn what they're doing right. Why is it that our vocations are down, but in the Latin area or the ordinary, it's booming? And I don't know, but I just don't understand why you're persecuting the TLM. It makes no sense. And
Yeah.
going back to what you said, the majority of the traditionalists that I've met, I don't even know a Sedevacanist. I don't know someone who is saying Francis is not the true pope. I mean, I know people who think that Benedict is still the pope. There's that belief, and that's above
Right.
my pay grade. But I don't like this representation that the trads. And do you even get it with your family? Because I sometimes get it with my family. It's like, yeah, I like to go to the Latin Mass. They're like, do you believe in New Gilead? Are you like Handmaid's Tale guy? I mean, is that what is this
Well,
stereotype?
it's funny you bring up The Handmaid's Tale. Like anybody who's actually even bothered to read that book would know that the antagonist in that book, the sons of Jacob, like one of their like one of the groups of people they went after they took over the United States was actually like Catholics, and that
Hmm.
was even like depicted in the Hulu miniseries as well. It's like up in like the hanging wall. It's like up on there was like an abortion doctor, a homosexual man, and a Catholic priest.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's like that's even like depicted, albeit lightly, in like in the TV series, and like I guess they show it like a little bit more in like the original book, and then like even a little bit in the sequel book, the Testaments, because like one of the things the characters in there mention is that like the people in Gilead, like in Gilead, Catholicism is on the same level as voodoo.
Hmm.
So it's sort of like going back to like those like really old like Protestant myths that Catholicism has more in common with like voodoo and like a lot of the pre-Christian cults than it does with actual Christianity.
Well, let's go back to the Protestants because I mean the argument was made by Bunini. If we take him for his, being earnest, is let's make the mass more Protestant because it's going to bring in more Protestants, and we've seen that has not worked. For every convert we get, we lose 12 people, 12 Catholics that no longer practice their faith. And I mean, I would love to hear from like a convert, but to me, it seems like when you're watering down the mass, and this is the same thing about the Orthodox. Like if we want to reunite with the Orthodox, they have this beautiful liturgy. Is the Novus Ordo with the resurrected Jesus and the mariachi music and all that, is that really going to make the Orthodox be like, you know what, we should go back to Rome? I think it's a horrible selling point. And
Yeah,
so I
it
think,
is a terrible selling point. Like, it's funny that you bring up the Orthodox because, like, the direction that the church has gone in since Vatican II, like, if anything, it's just made the Catholic Church look like it just made us look like a big fat joke. Just to be
hmm,
blunt about it. And it's like even like there's a lot of people in the Orthodox Church who have actually tried to take advantage of that. It's like they know that there's a lot of conservatives in the Catholic Church who have become very disgruntled with the way that like the Pope and bishops have been running things. So they're trying to take advantage of that by trying to encourage some of those more conservative Catholics to come and join the Orthodox Church.
and you have seen that. Like I have an episode coming out in a month about Hank Hanagram. He was the Bible answer man. He had the big Protestant call-in apologetic show, and he left evangelicalism and went to Orthodox. There's a Roosh V. Roosh V was a big MGTOW guy about 10 years ago, pickup artist, MGTOW guy, and he went Rheinko, Russian Orthodox Church in America, which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of the more conservative orthodoxy. But going back to the point is like if I'm a Protestant, I think the Latin Mass would be like, like, oh my God, this is like I'm going back to the 16th century. I don't know if that's good. Maybe they don't like that. But if I go as a Protestant, depending on what my background, let's say I'm an evangelical, non-denominational, and I go to a Novus Ordo Mass, I'm like, why would I find this appealing? This is bad music. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not a convert. I'm a cradle. So I'm just kind of theorizing like what would make a Protestant, what would attract Protestants more. But we know this is true. Making the mass more Protestant, more horizontal, has not been effective in bringing Protestants as a whole into the church. Just the
That's
numbers
right.
show that. The numbers show that. And let's look at some comments here. Michael, thank you for the mode appropriate. I appreciate that. Michael, do you want to tell us where's your ideological bent? If you're a liberal, we will not shame you. Casey, why make the mass more Protestant? They're all the same. There should be an obvious difference because they are not the same. Yeah, I don't know. I would love to. I would love to know the kind of the Protestant perspective of the mass, like somebody who's gone to a Novus Ordo mass and then gone to a TLM or an ordinariate and see what's their take on that. But I don't know. Either way, do you think when Francis, rest in peace, passes away, that the next pope is going to restrict or lift all these restrictions? Because right now, like if you can't have a TLM and mention in the bulletin, you have to get permission now from the Vatican, because Benedict freed a lot of that up.
Mm-hmm.
But now Francis has put a lot more restrictions on it. Do you anticipate the next pope doing his own motu proprio and being like, just don't worry about that. We're going to go back to the way it was with Benedict. If a priest knows Latin and there's a congregation who wants it, boom, we'll have a Latin mass.
I think it all depends on who ultimately becomes the pope after, like, Pope Francis either passes away or retires. Like, there's some cardinals who I can see that are going to continue the policies of Pope Francis, and like maybe even take the next step and restrict it even more, or like they might like go like the direction of Benedict and just try to like revert things back to when he was Pope, and like maybe even just like continue to just like free it up.
What's your impression of what you think will get the next pope? Because if I'm not mistaken, most of the cardinals have now been chosen by Francis, and I mean, how many traditional cardinals are of age? What was the name of the African one who was in charge of the Congregation of Liturgy, and then Francis had
That
him?
that was Cardinal Sarah, and like I
So,
know I've talked to you like about this a few times. I think like even like this very day, I think that Sarah could like realistically be a good compromise candidate between like the few conservative cardinals from like Benedict's time who are like still around, and like even like the new cardinals that have been appointed by Francis, because like he's given lip service to both sides. Like he said like a lot of like conservative, like traditionalist things like in the past, but like at the same time he's also kind of like placated the left as well. So I think like it's because of that. Like a lot of people see him as like being like papable, is because like they see him as sort of like this like an almost ideal like compromise candidate between the two.
well, my problem with those types is like the term I like to use is a values chameleon. Like if you're placating to the left and the right, do you even represent anything? Or maybe he does represent something like the HBO show, The New Pope, and maybe he is a wolf of sheep's clothing, so to speak, and maybe he is a conservative. Who knows? I mean, does the St. Gallen Mafia? Do we even know like who is going to be their choice to replace their guy? Do we have any idea like the successors to the St. Gallen Mafia, what they want or who they
I
want?
think like putting myself in the mind of the Saint Gallen people, like if I was them, I would probably be pushing for that cardinal in like the Philippines. Like what's his name? As like like the people in the comments, I know you know who I'm talking about. Like you
Look it up.
point this like what's his name? Like I'm actually going to Google it right now. But like there's this cardinal in the Philippines who's been like sort of like France's like
Tegel.
de facto
Tegel.
right hand man, and like the liberals really seem to like him, and like seems like to be like a lot of folks who really want him to become pope. But like, well, one of the main arguments that's being Louis Tegel, Cardinal Tegel. But of course, like one of the arguments that's being made against him is that he's just like way too young. But
Well, I mean, John Paul II was 55 when he became the Pope. But
yeah, he was.
do you think there's any chance that we could have an American cardinal? I am worried to death, Joseph, that when they say Habemus Papam, Supich is going to come out and he's going to be Francis
Oh,
II. Oh my
I
God.
don't. I don't even want to entertain the thought. Like, Bruno just commented, like, it could be Robert Barron. Like,
Uh,
it's like, I guess, like, technically speaking, it could, but, like, the thing is, he's not a cardinal yet. I think he's still, like, a
right.
auxiliary
He's a
bishop.
bishop. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
but soupage. Oh my God! So I have an episode coming out in a month. I
It's
went
like
to
if an American ever does become Pope, I really hope it's Burke. Yeah, I know he's really old and he's not exactly in the best of health, but like who knows? Like maybe like the liberals would go on with like electing him, you know, like believing that he probably won't even be Pope for that long. It's like he had COVID like last year and
Hmm.
almost died. So I figure like if he gets elected, you know, like he'll just be around for a few years. You know, like maybe we can like placate the trads and the conservatives for a little while, but then like once he dies, we'll elect some like young liberal and go back to business as usual.
I mean,
I can very well see something like that happening.
it is possible that they think that they have moved too quickly to the left and they want to give us a moderate candidate. That is possible.
Yeah, it's
I
like I've heard like Taylor Marshall talk about that quite a bit. Like one of the things I remember him talking about in one of his the episodes on his show is like a is like even like a lot of the like cardinals that Francis is like appointed. Like just because he appointed them doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with every single thing they do. And like even like a lot of those cardinals may become a little bit like burnt out with like how much he's tried to change and like you know, like little at time. They think you know it might be about time that they like slow things down a little bit. You know,
well,
because if they push things too fast, like you know, like we force people to like accept like way too much than they can handle, then it has the potential of you know just pushing people away completely.
I don't know if they're even concerned with that, to be honest. I mean, like Pope Benedict did say that the church was going to get smaller and smaller and there'd be a remnant. I don't mean we can talk about at what point do we think that the church would be in open apostasy. If you look at like what the German schismatic cardinals want, they want us to have divorce and remarriage. Well, you don't have to be have an annulment to receive the Eucharist. At that point, if the papacy ever says that's okay, is that just open heresy? Because there's people, of course, YouTube content creators that will say that Francis has already said heretical statements. Like, you know, he said great things about Luther. Luther was a great man. He
Yeah,
said,
that's just like
yeah,
cringy.
yeah, of course, the Pachamama stuff. He also talked about how Jews and Muslims are part of the community of saints. And so, you know, again, that's above
Yeah,
my pay grade.
so
That's
I don't
all.
even remember that. But it's like as like you know talking about some of the things that Francis has done. One of the things that really like sticks out to me was like I think it was like maybe like last year. Whereas, like, he came out like into like in an address like to world governments that said that they need to recognize like the rights of gay people to marry, so that like they won't be persecuted or something like that. And like that was just a huge face palm moment for me.
Well, so I think like if it's a private discussion, it's one thing. But if he ever goes ex cathedra on something that's part of the ordinary magisterium, something that we've always believed, then it's like going to sedevacantism. You know, like talking about the guy here. At what point? So like if he says it's okay, and he's never given an indication. I want to be, you know, like he's, you know, how Francis is. Like he'll have these
Right,
interviews with atheist newspaper reporters, or like when Biden came and Biden said that Francis said it was okay for him to receive the Eucharist, and then you check with the Vatican. The Vatican always says no comment. You know that his Francis's people are really good at that. But if he ever says, or the next pope says, it's okay for divorced and not annulled Catholics to receive the Eucharist, or if he says that we're going to start blood approving same-sex blessings or whatever. I mean, he did say that if any priest did do that, they would be excommunicated. So to his credit, he did say that maybe last year. But I'm just like wondering, because a lot of trad cats are like you and me. It's like we're worried, and we see these somewhat or outright heretical. And he's not a material heretic. He can't be a material heretic. He's a formal heretic. You can't be the Pope and say and have invincible ignorance that you didn't know that you were believing something that wasn't Catholic
right.
teaching. So at what point do the trad casts are like, oh my God? You're like, an obvious one would be like if a Pope says, well, Jesus, you know, there's no hypostatic union, or there's 5 persons in the Trinity. Well, clearly we know that is just, you know, then that's apostasy. But like for you, at what point would you be like, oh man, the church is in apostasy? What would it take you to make that acknowledgement?
I don't know because if I'm being completely honest, it's one of those things that I really don't want to think about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't either. But I think either way, when they bring out the new pope, we can gauge a lot by the name that they choose. Like I am praying for a Pius the 13th. That's a good sign, right? You would think, unless they're trying to do like a bait and switch. A Leo the 14th, an innocent. Let's go back to Felix. Let's do these old names. But if we get a Francis the second, you know what that's going to entail. If we get a Paul the seventh, that's what it's going to entail. I've talked to you privately. We even have our top two guesses, like who we want and what we think. And I think the next pope is going to either go Francis 2 or JP 3. JP 3 will be like the moderate, because if he picks the name JP 3, that's going to placate a lot of the far right. And so he could be a more moderate person. What do you think? What do you think is the name?
I think like the day like you and I talked about that, I think my top two guesses was either like John Paul III, just like you, or like maybe even a Benedict the
17th?
17th.
Well, then that would suggest that he's a conservative. I mean, like the Sedevacanists would, of course, tell you that Benedict is no way a conservative and so forth. But either way, okay, so let's continue because we're almost at an hour. We're just talking away. So we have a Sedevacanists here. What is your take on SSPX? What is your take on because the Ecclesia Day churches, I don't think you'd have a problem going to an FSSP or what's the Institute of Christ the King?
Yeah, it's the FSSP and the Institute of Christ the King, and like, I would have no qualms about going to one of their services at all.
What about SSPX? And then what's your take on Sedevacanism and like where do Sedevacanists like the question I have with Sedevacanists, and I guess I could go and ask Most Holy Family Monastery, one of those guys, is how would we have a new cardinal chosen if there's no bishops? Sorry, new pope chosen if there's no cardinals that are alive? Okay, we just have a conclave of just. I mean, how would that even go? But what's your take on the SSPX?
I was like the SSPX, like that's one of the more that's one of the more controversial areas of the church. Like for me, like I got a tremendous amount of respect for them, like and for their founder, Archbishop Lefebvre. It's like he like said and like even like did a lot of things that a lot of the like trads, like especially early on, like just didn't have the guts to do. But like at the same time, though, like with the icon consecrations, I think it's possible that he might have.
Can you clarify what that is for people who don't know?
Well, it's like with the icon consecrations, and like you got to remember, like the relations between the Vatican and the SSPX had always been kind of like rocky. I think, like technically speaking, like Lefebvre wasn't even supposed to form like SSPX in the first place. But like that aside, yeah, it's like throughout like the papacies, like Paul the VI, and then like up to like John Paul II, like relations had always been kind of like uneasy, and then like around like 1988, like Archbishop Lefebvre knew that Archbishop Lefebvre that like he knew like he's an old man, he's not going to be around very longer, and like he knew like when he passed away, it was very likely that Pope John Paul II would probably try to like to dissolve the SSPX and like do away with all of his hard work. So he really wanted to appoint a few bishops into the SSPX who could continue to ordain priests after he had died, but Pope John Paul II wouldn't let him do it, and
Right.
basically he went against the orders of the Pope and ordained
Joseph,
those bishops anyways.
for sake of time, because we're close to an hour, have you been to an SSPX mass? Would you go to an SSPX mass? What's your take on the SSPX? I mean, there's no like right or wrong answer here because everyone's gonna have a different opinion. But what's your take on that?
Well, it's like a problem with like the SSPX is like their non-canonical status. Because
Mm-hmm.
like thing is like I have been and like I know I've talked about this a few times, but like I just like don't know like how I'm supposed to like to respond to that. Because like as far as I know, that kind of status has never been conferred upon like any sort of like a priestly fraternity or brotherhood, like in the entire history of the church. But like at the same time, Archbishop Lefebvre, he did go against the will of the Pope, which is like something you're not supposed to do. And it's because like all these like contradictions and like this sort of gray area that it makes me very hesitant to ever want to attend a SSPX like service. But of course, that being said, I still have a tremendous amount of respect for them and the Archbishop, and I offer up a decade for them, a decade of the Rosary for them every single day, that their canonical status will be restored and that they be brought like fully into communion with the church again. Because like honestly, if that one thing is done, it would be a huge boon for the traditionalist movement. Because like the way I see it, that's a huge like spot of like contention among the traditionalist movement, which is the status of the SSPX. So if there ever comes a day where the Vatican comes out and resolves that, makes all that go away, it would be the best thing ever for people like us.
But I agree, but what precedent would that set? Because what you're saying is you're essentially validating disobedience. Now, whether or not Lefebvre should have rebelled, so to speak, and ordained the 4 bishops is neither here nor there. I mean, depending on someone's view of the SSPX. But if they gave him regular status again, aren't we essentially saying it's okay to go against the Vatican, and that does open a Pandora's box?
Possibly. I still think that there's got to be some sort of compromise that they can come to.
Now, my understanding is Catholics, anyone can go to an SSPX, especially if you feel that your soul's in danger by going to a Novus Ordo Mass. And of course, I will give SSPX credit, their YouTube channel, I think is pretty good. It's pretty informative. They'll tell you that, of course, you can go to their Mass, and they are not schismatics. They do pray for the Pope in their Mass. So they're not schismatic. They're not Orthodox, for example.
Yeah, it's like even like Archbishop Schneider in like one of the books that he wrote, like that's one of the things that he talked about in regards to the SSPX a lot. And like even like Catholic Answers, like they have like an entire section on the SSPX where like they say like if you live in an area where there's not a single like Catholic service that's done like reverently, but there is a SSPX service, then like in a circumstance like that, it would be acceptable to go to a SSPX service.
Well, okay, so the argument against anything that EWTN and Catholic Answers is going to say is that they're not going to encourage people to go to SSPX. So I mean, they are a corporation, and they have to kind of maintain the party line. I mean, you certainly see like the episode I released today is there's salvation outside the church. You'll get people who call in to these places, and like I read in the comments in today's episode, a lot of people are just like, I don't know, because the church always taught that there was no salvation outside of the Catholic Church. This is dogmatic in different councils, and now you'll hear people like, I'm not going to name apologists on EWTN or Catholic Answers. They're saying, well, there was an evolution on that, or people misunderstand the anathema thing, and Old Testament prophets, of course, were saved, but I mean that was because Jesus did not establish the kingdom here on earth yet. We didn't have the church yet, so I don't know, but the way I look at it is like if we say that there's salvation outside the church, to me it lends to indifferentism. Then why be Catholic? If good Protestants and good Orthodox and good whoever can go to the church, can go to heaven, we are on the harder road. I mean, there's no denomination that has a harder road. You could be salvation by faith alone, non-denominational evangelical, can believe in rapture. You can sin all you want because you're saved no matter what. You can divorce and remarry. Fornication is not really frowned upon. I mean, then why don't I go that way if I'm going to be saved either way? The Catholic way is the hard way. And I think you've seen since Vatican II, this message of well, a lot of people can be saved. And look, I understand it. Ultimately, it's God. God decides that. But I just think it takes away from the message of the Catholic Church. If there's many spokes to the wheel that can be saved, then why be Catholic? Because we have the fullness of the faith. I get that. But I just think it takes away from the message. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's like there's not really much more that I can add on to that. It's like you're like yeah, it's like so as you said, you're like saying that everybody is saved. It's basically just a very dangerous, slippery slope.
Hmm. Hmm. So I have gone to an SSPX mass before. Again, it's not my regular parish or anything like that. I found it to be like a lot of TLM, the FSSP and Institute of Christ the King, the same kind of people. I did find the priest there. His homily was kind of a little chiding of the Novus Ordo, of
Hmm.
Rome, by saying like, how can we believe that the Holy Spirit uh, can 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 change his mind and contradict himself, and that's essentially what the church is saying, prior to Vatican II. And I didn't necessarily have a problem with the sermon, but the person or the homily, but the person I went with found it to be like, don't mix politics with the faith. And I don't have a problem with a polemical homily because we don't get enough of it. I mean, how many times prior to you going to a Latin mass do you remember a priest at a Novus Ordo mass saying, stop cohabiting, stop fornicating, stop contracepting, don't support abortion, you can't receive the Eucharist, you're essentially a heretic if you do? Like, how often do we get those kind of strong homilies at a Novus Ordo parish?
Well, it's like the stuff against abortion, like yeah, you'll still hear that like these days, but like all that other stuff you mentioned, like the contraception, like fornication, cohabitation. Honestly, I don't think I have ever heard a Novus Ordo priest speak out against that. And that's
But
actually kind of scary now that I realize that.
and why do we think they don't do that? Because they don't want to alienate the congregation. They don't want people to stop going. And I get it. Maybe pastorally, it's better not to say, this is why the church teaches against homosexual marriage, because maybe they're thinking, we'll sever that connection with that person and they won't come back. But on one level, it's like, well, we have to preach the teachings of the church, and no matter how it, no matter what it does, if it separates mother from daughter and father from son, like Christ says, I think we just have to preach the truth. And if people don't want to hear it, like the people didn't want to hear Christ in John 6 when he was saying, you need to eat my body and drink my blood, and he just let him walk away. I just, that's what attracts me to the traditionalist area, because you will get more of those homilies challenging us, and men like to be challenged.
Right.
We don't need to hear enough more. We hear enough of Jesus the hippie, Jesus the communist, peace and love homilies, social justice homilies. It's just none of those are memorable. Thank you, Charlie. A friend of mine who used to go to the SPIT said the sermons were bashing the post-Vatican Church and the Novus are about half the time. Yeah. Like I can't comment on that. I've only gone one time, but right now they're batting 1 for 1. But look, I think there's those in the Latin Mass community, SSPX or regular, who really believe that if they're going to a Novus Ordo Mass, it's endangering their soul, endangering their family, and so they're like, we're not going to go. And then you'll hear on the other side too, the Novus Ordo will say the same thing about SSPX. So again, it's above my pay grade. I don't know. I don't know. I will say that I am not a Sedevacanist. So Sedevacanist is the truth. I certainly sympathize with you. If you could answer, like, how could we pick a pope, or unless Joseph, do you know, like, how could we pick a pope if all the card? I mean, like, I know in the olden days that we didn't even have the College of Cardinals. It was just like a mob would choose the pope, or factions. But why are you not a Sedevacanist?
Well, I guess like maybe like the main reason why like I haven't become a state of a cantist is like I guess because like I'm not entirely convinced that like the church is in a state of apostasy, at least not yet.
Well, you did mention the fruits of Vatican II. All the numbers are dropping and everything. I mean, maybe they would say that in itself, and not to mention the Novus Ordo Mass, a lot of them would say that the words of consecration have changed, and that in itself made the sacrament illicit and invalid. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know either. It's like you said, like this is like above my pay grade as well. It's like I'm not entirely sure, and like I guess you like tying back into you like how would we even select a pope? if if like there's no college of cardinals to elect one, like I guess if you were to ask some of those like conclavists, anti popes, which like there's dozens of them now, like they're like one of them, like a pope, like that Pope Michael guy. Like you remember
Um,
that documentary I sent to you, right? Like if
yeah.
you're to ask him, like you just need just like a handful of followers to get together in some like abandoned supermarket in the middle of Kansas to just cast the votes, and like it doesn't even matter if like two of the people voting are your parents.
I mean, the Catholic Church is supposed to be it's universal, and it's supposed to have a large following. We're not a cult, and so I find it hard to believe that the true church would be 10 people at a supermarket. But there are these weird sedevacantist offshoot fringe groups that they really believe that. But by the way, let's finish up pretty soon here. Did you want to? Well, we've done an hour, so let's just get to quick questions. Let's spend 5 minutes on Catholic dating, and then we'll go into some rapid fire questions and close it up. So you are single and you're looking to marry another traditionalist. What has been your impression with Catholic dating? Are you using like Bumble and Tinder, or are you on Catholic Match, Catholic Singles, and
I'm on Catholic Match, and like I was on a lot more of the Catholic sites, but I wasn't really having much luck with the other Catholic sites. Really, just Catholic Match. So eventually, I just deleted my accounts in the other one and just stuck with a Catholic Match. And like I was even on Hinge for a little while, but it's like eventually I just deleted like my page there because like that's actually one of the places where I came to find that just because somebody goes out of their way to identify as Catholic doesn't necessarily mean they actually are Catholic. So I was like a so I was like my experience with Hinge, like though I got some results from that, um, I was actually like became like pretty disappointed with it. So eventually I just did away with Hinge, and like now it's really just Catholic Match at this point.
do you filter on Catholic Match for only conservative women, or women who are like the Latin Mass, or do you filter at all?
Yes, I do filter, pretty heavily actually.
And what is your impression of the women there? I mean, are there like legitimate, like virgins and people who actually practice their faith? Or do you sense that some of them are like women who've just gotten tired of secular dating? They are Catholic by name only. And they're like, well, I'm just going to sign up for this and maybe I can find some rich Catholic guy. And they're just kind of like not really practicing their faith.
Yeah, I was like, no, my impression is that most of the women on Catholic Match are, like essentially like true believers. Yeah, it's like they are genuinely Catholics. They want to like live their faith to like the best extent that they can. And like I've had some pretty good experiences with it. Is like some of the problems I've had. So like some of the women that I was with, like some of them like they lived too far away, and like that whole like long distance thing, which I've tried that twice, and it didn't really work out so well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like then like there's been like occasions where like I've been ghosted or like I wasn't really like vibing with them very well, and but no, like despite that, my experience on the Catholic Match has been very positive, actually.
So would you marry or date a Protestant who says that they would convert? Or would you date a Catholic who believes in abortion or contracepts in the hope that maybe you can convert them over to obedience to Holy Mother Church?
What that last one, definitely not. Because like, let me tell you something that I've like had to learn the hard way. You can't change someone unless they want to be changed.
Mm.
So it's like on that last one, I wouldn't even waste my time. But like maybe like a Protestant or a Orthodox girl who like genuinely plans to convert, or like maybe even is already going through the conversion process, like RCIA, like that. Yeah, I would date someone like that.
Okay, let's go back. Let's finish it up. So, what would be the one advice that you would give to a pastor of a TLM or an ordinary? I mean, I know the advice we would probably give a Novus Ordo pastor would be, have a more solemn mass. I think more people would respond to that. The majority of more people would. Would you give any advice to a pastor of an ordinary parish or a TLM parish? maybe have more social groups.
Yeah, it's like you definitely have more social groups because, like, actually, like one of the things like I learned from like one of the Facebook groups that I'm on, I think it was like the Archbishop Fulton Sheen Society, or like
Yeah,
actually, I think it
yeah,
was one of the
yeah.
like one of the singles pages that I'm on there, and one of the things like they talked about how like in the old days, and like even like to a lesser extent at some churches today, is like churches would hold like a youth like dance groups or like social groups, and how in the old days like that's how a lot of Catholics would actually meet their spouses. So like I think like maybe my advice on that front would be to hold like maybe like weekly or bi-weekly like maybe like dances or like youth get-togethers or like young adult get-togethers. To just encourage like some like the young people in the church, to come in and mingle, like even just talk to each other. As like, as I really think that would go like a long way.
I think for your age, like most of the youth groups that you see in parishes, whether they be traditional or not, is it's your age or maybe like college age. Like for my age though, like if you're in your 30s and 40s, they never have groups for these people. Like they always have groups for the 20-year-olds and then the senior citizens let's play cards group.
Yeah,
But
that is pretty unfortunate. Like especially like these days. Like I think like there should be like groups for like for people like you as well, because like the truth of the matter is like people are getting married like later and later in life, and like are staying single for a lot longer than they did like in the past, and like maybe like to a certain degree like maybe that's not their fault, like maybe it's sort of like a consequence of them growing up in the type of culture and society we are, but
mhm.
the church isn't exactly doing much of anything to try to like counterbalance that.
Well, look, like at my church, at our church, the Ordinariate, there's no single women in their mid 30s. I mean, clearly, most of those women are trad cats, and they got married very young, and they have like 4 kids, and they believe in indissolubility of marriage. So, for someone like me, then I would need to hope that there is a divorce and annulled or a widowed Catholic or something like that. So,
Not
even
necessarily true. That's
you
not
don't think so?
necessarily true, because like thing is like on some like the traditional Catholic singles group that I'm on, like I've come across like on several occasions where like there's like young women like my age, maybe even like just a little bit older, who will say that they will only date or consider marrying older men.
Mhm. Well, I mean, how much older? But I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter.
And it's
But I
like about
mean,
like 10 plus years older.
okay.
You would be
Well,
in that range.
I am 48, so I mean, I guess
Oh
it
yeah.
depends on
Oh yeah, you're
everyone's age.
48.
Never mind. But
I tend to forget that because like you do actually look a bit like younger than
well,
actually.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So let's do some rapid fire stuff here at the end. I did want to talk about some other things, but really quickly, did you want to talk about Cardinal Zen being arrested and Pope Francis not really coming out and condemning that? And by the way, have you seen Silence, that Martin Scorsese movie about the persecution in Japan in the 17th century? Because it kind of reminded me of that, even though they're
No, it's like
separate
we've
countries.
sort of yeah, you brought that up to me once, but I haven't seen it yet. I want to though, because like I remember like it was being advertised a bunch, back when it came out, and
Yeah,
like didn't you say that Father the
Father
Rainbow
Bear. I think
what's his
Father
name?
James Martin.
Yeah, James Martin, the Rainbow Jesuit. You said that he was one of the advisors for that movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Knowing
So
that kind of makes me not want to see it.
no, I like okay. So it's on Amazon Prime, so it's free. It's a great movie because it shows the martyrdom of these priests and of the Japanese Catholics that were there. But it doesn't really remind me of the Chinese communist issue because like in France, the Chinese communists have their puppet Catholic Church, and then there's the real Catholic Church. And I've just been frustrated with the lack of support from the papacy toward the authentic Catholic Church. And
Yeah.
so, like with Cardinal Zen being arrested, I mean, it's just frustrating. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah,
All right.
it's incredibly frustrating for me too. It's like
All right.
there's like it's like correct me if I'm wrong, but like the Catholic Patriotic Front in China, like for like the longest time, the Vatican like stated that the Catholic Patriotic Front like is not genuinely Catholic. And
Mhm.
like now, like Pope Francis comes around, and like all he wants to do is like make a deal with the Chinese, and like he recognized the Catholic Patriotic Front, and like what upsets me about this, what upsets like me the most about this, like this kind of ties back into our discussion on the SSPX, and like I even think like some Catholic authors like Thomas Woods and like Christopher Ferrara wrote in their book The Great Facade that like they're like the church's acknowledgement of the Catholic Patriotic Front is completely hypocritical because like they will like give like acknowledge the like some like phony Catholic like communist puppet group in China, but they won't give recognition to the SSPX. Like
Right.
it's completely hypocritical.
Well, but I mean, that kind of tells you maybe of the leaning that we're talking about here. They'll kind of like be a little more lenient on the left than they are on the right. But I mean,
Yeah.
theoretically, like I've talked about, there's no such thing as a liberal Catholic. It's the same thing with our curia and the magisterium. There should not be such a thing as liberal cardinals and conservative cardinals in an ideal world. It should just be practicing Catholics and
Yeah, I know.
practicing
It's like
cardinals.
even like State of a Contest is the truth. He just commented. Like Vatican II didn't condemn communism, and
Yeah.
like that's exactly right. And unfortunately, that's been like a huge like slippery slope for us.
Right. And I think they would say pastorally by condemning it, they would have killed more Catholics behind the Iron Curtain. I
Yeah,
don't know. It just, yeah. I mean, you would think that when this council was convened, this is height of right during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, this is at the peak of Cold War tension, and how could you not condemn an ideology that one of its goals is the destruction of Christianity? I mean, how can you not condemn that? But that's neither here nor there. Let's just do some rapid fire stuff because we're almost getting to an hour and a half. What is your favorite or top two favorite saints, just off the top of your head?
off the top of my head, Saint Joseph and Saint Pius X.
I like St. Francis Xavier and I like Padre Pio. What is your favorite decade of the Rosary? And you can include the Luminous. Do you have a favorite decade?
The Sorrowful Mysteries.
Which sorrowful though?
Hang on. I get my pamphlet out. Well, the individual sorrowful mysteries, I guess I'd have to say, I guess I'd have to say the agony in the garden.
Okay. I like the agony because that's where Christ, shows obedience. And he says, let this cup pass, but if it's your will be done, then so be it. I always love that part about the agony. Mine would be Pentecost, descent of the Holy Spirit. Maria says hers is Annunciation. I could totally understand that. Do you have a favorite feast day or favorite season of the liturgical calendar?
Favorite season? Christmas, I guess.
Christmas season?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Anything else you want to talk about before we finish up? Any questions?
No, I think that's about it. I think we covered just about everything that I wanted to go over.
Great. So, in short, you are a traditionalist for life. And if you ever move from the town that we're at, I'm assuming that you would either go to an ordinary parish or an FSSP or Institute of Christ the King, one of the Ecclesia Day churches. Like,
Yeah,
if you
I
ever,
would. Like, I've actually given a lot of thought to that because, I'm actually going to be moving, from our current location here in a few months, and I'm working on my master's degree right now. Like, I'm either going to be finishing that up sometime this summer, or like worst case scenario, I could be working I'd be wrapping this up till like the end of this year. But like once that does happen, I'm actually thinking about relocating out to Houston, and like there's a FSSP parish there that I'm actually very interested in.
so if you had a choice, like I know Houston has an ordinary. The ordinariate's actually headquartered there. So
Yes, I remember that.
you would choose to go to one of the Ecclesia Day churches instead of the ordinariate if you had a choice.
Yeah, if I had a choice between the two, I'd probably pick the FSSP.
I probably would. Yeah, I probably would too. Yeah, but I don't live in a town. I don't have that option. I don't foresee myself leaving anytime soon. So if any of you guys want to call in, I know you haven't called, but if Charlie, Maria, and you guys want to call in with a comment, to give your take on the church today, we got a couple minutes here, Bruno, and if you want to do that, call in now.
Yeah, I was like, state of
And
the contest is the truth. Like you've been like leaving comments like up and down this entire live stream. Like I'd actually really like to hear what you have to say. So like if you're able to or you can, please call in. Like I'd really like to get your perspective on this entire thing.
is it really surprising that the Sedevacanists would be the most vociferous voice? It's
No,
it's
it's not
it's not
surprising at
surprising.
all. Like I
Yeah.
would honestly be more surprised if he only left one comment and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to have a set of a candidates. I am, as I mentioned, I'm going to bring on the religious hippie over the weekend, but I do have a friend who is a Freemason and he's a Rosicrucian. And so clearly he's not a Christian at all. And I'm going to bring him on. So we're going to discuss some of that. But if any of you are listening to this after the fact, because I know we don't have a lot of people listening now, if you want to come on and get interviewed, that'd be great. I've reached out to a lot of priests, and most of them say that they can't because they have to get permission from their superiors. I understand that, so I'm probably going to be more likely to interview lay people. But if any of you want to get interviewed or just talk about stuff or do a roundtable, just reach out to me at 5 Minute Catholic Apologetics. If you go under About, my email is right there, and you can message me, and that's one way to do it. But Joseph, I appreciate you coming on today and talking for an hour and a half and giving us an hour and a half of your time. I really appreciate that.
I appreciate you having me.
All right, take care. God bless.
Yeah, take care. God bless you too.
Thank you. So, guys, I appreciate you coming on, and we're going to be finishing this up. And please come back on Saturday when we have Amber Rose talking about what she wants to talk about. I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.